So, Alliance for Children, what do you guys do here?
Yeah, so we're the Children's Advocacy Center in Tarrant County, and our mission is to work with child abuse victims. So we do that in a variety of ways, but we support the investigative process. So we really have a model in Tarrant County, and it's really a nationwide model. That when there is a situation where child abuse has occurred, and the easiest way to describe it is if it meets a criminal component where there has been a crime against a child, then we do a joint investigation with law enforcement, with Child Protective Services, and a variety of our partners to make sure that we're following best practices for children and we're mitigating any kind of trauma that might be occurring.
Speaking of trauma, how important is it to treat children when they've been traumatized?
Oh, super important, because our idea and our goal is that after something really terrible has happened, after trauma has happened, that the children have the possibility to heal after that. So it's really important for us to walk alongside with children and families that are experiencing those situations.
For families that experience trauma, is it easily recognizable when a child is traumatized?
So I think it probably depends on the situation and what actually occurred. Like in our field with Alliance for Children as a children's advocacy center, we work with child abuse. So a lot of times that can be easily recognized. So it probably depends on the amount of trauma and what kind of trauma that happened to them. But it doesn't mean that whenever you're looking at a child that they're necessarily are behaving in a way that would indicate that, hey, something is really wrong and I've been really traumatized in some fashion.
And your advocates, they're trained to deal with this and to get through to children.
Sure. So we really work together as a multidisciplinary team. So we have a lot of different people in different professions that are involved, and like all for that one benefit of that child that's going through that process. So all of us are really highly trained in different capacities. Like our investigators are really great at doing investigations, and again in a really trauma-informed way. But then we also have support for children in our healing services. So we have family advocates that are there, like recognizing that this is a really stressful situations for children and families. So they're there to support that process. They might do case management. They walk alongside families to provide resources. And then again, to that concept I mentioned earlier, is we want to make sure that long-term healing happens. So we also have a clinical team that provides counseling and therapy for children, and when appropriate for families that need that.
What would you say to parents who suspect their child is traumatized behind, something that's happened to them? What do you say to parents about making sure that they recognize, or what should they be looking for to say, you know what, I might not be able to do this myself. I need a professional.
Sure. And again, we kind of work in the field of child abuse. So like there's also sometimes that things might happen to your child and then not necessarily telling you about that. But we also like recognize, like as parents, you probably know what normal is for your child. So you know your child's normal behavior, if they're happy-go-lucky, if they're outgoing, if they're shy, how they interact with people around them. So then that's different for every child. So if you're noticing just a drastic change in that behavior, and that might look really different for children. So if you're noticing some sort of change, just don't dismiss that and kind of pay more attention to that and try to figure out where that's coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it hard to get a child to open up when they don't know you, you don't know them? Is that part of the process of getting them healed and whole?
Yeah, and it kind of depends on the child, but I have always been surprised at how quickly the professionals that I work with are able to gain rapport with a child. And I think part of that is we're very intentional in that process. So I don't know, you went to our lobby. I know like people that are watching this have not, but as soon as you walk into our lobby, you can tell how intentional that is. So we have very child-friendly atmosphere. We have a little reading nook if that makes people more comfortable. So we really have a welcoming atmosphere as soon as families come through our doors. And our hope is to help children and families recognize that like our whole entire existence and what we're here to do is to support them in some capacity. So I think that may be some of the reasons that children can sometimes open up and like really gain access to us a lot quicker, because we're like, that's what we're there for. We're there to help them.
Do you guys have to deal with a stigma that my child needs help that some parents have to fight through?
Absolutely. I think sometimes it might be, again, depending on the situation, but I think sometimes it's hard for communities to recognize that child abuse is actually a really prevalent thing that happens. So I think it could be of like, hey, we're fine, like, or like this is something we'll handle in the family, everything is fine. But resources are out there, and it's okay to receive that support. So it's okay to get professional help in situations where there's really been something really traumatizing that has occurred.
Yeah. Do you guys deal with? I've heard the term secondary post-traumatic stress when situations happen to children. That can happen to a child just like an adult, right?
Yeah, I think so. For secondary trauma, is that like what we're referring to? I think typically we refer to that or like vicarious trauma, to where it might have not been something that happened to you, but this is something that you're experiencing, like as part of like your family, or maybe like even as a professional, this is something you're hearing on a day in basis. So that is like traumatic as well. So we certainly want to provide resources and support to people that like maybe like you're not the primary person that's the victim, but this is certainly impacting you in some capacity because you're involved in that situation.
What's the first step in getting the help for parents? What's the first step?
Yeah, well, luckily in Tarrant County, we have lots of resources available. So I think the first step is probably just to ask for that if you don't know what those resources are, and then like just asking for help and getting that kind of one supporter that can help you navigate that process and where to receive that help.
Yeah. And is there, when it comes to getting children back whole again emotionally, is there a time frame tied to it at all?
No, I think it's really a process, and it's different from every situation. It's different from every child, and it's a very fluid process. So you might feel like you're doing okay at the moment, but then there might be something that's triggering that brings all of that back. So at Alliance for Children, we really kind of have that. Recognizing that, we really have the concept of like, if you feel like you're okay right now, but a month from now you're like, oh gosh, like I'm not okay anymore. Come back to us, and we'll support that as well.
I was going to ask you about triggers.
Yes.
Because sometimes children can go through something and they seem okay. Is there such thing as a delayed reaction to trauma?
For sure. I think it could be a number of situations, like you might be in this crisis situation to where like this is all I can do right now is just kind of cope through that crisis, and then maybe things kind of slow down and you're starting to process all those feelings and everything that you've experienced. So you could have a situation like that to where like I felt like I was fine, but I was so numb to it, and now I'm actually experiencing some of those emotions. But then we also see situations where it's like we've been through, like maybe it's a child that has come through our doors and they've been through counseling and they completed their counseling and they're like in a good place, but now their case is going to prosecution and they have to testify in court. So that could be something that's like, well, now I'm triggered by all of these things coming back up, and we have families that need support in that moment as well. So it could be a variety of, like, again, it's that fluid process. So meeting families where they're at and meeting children where they're at in that moment is important.
With you overseeing training here, have you and the other advocates and counselors, have you seen, or let me ask you this, what does it feel like to see the success of getting a child from point A to point B, knowing that you've helped them? What, personally, how does that feel?
Yeah, I mean, it feels great, obviously, whenever you have a situation where like somebody's like really at their worst moment of their lives and are going through a lot, and kind of seeing that journey of how they get better and better. So I think that's always a really nice thing to see. But in that process, it's also hard to gauge what success looks like, because like there's not this kind of like, all right, you've done your counseling and then you're done and you're healed, like again, because it's such a fluid process with that. But we certainly celebrate every success that we see. We celebrate every victory with children telling us that they're feeling better, or overcoming, like building coping mechanisms, or when they experience things that they themselves are like, I couldn't do this yesterday, but like I'm able to talk about this today. So seeing some of those is really is why we do the work that we do. So it's really nice to see that come through.